Most people remember the Youngster for Joey, the Youngster whose Rattata was in the top percentage of all Rattata. So for this Youngster trainer class theme deck, of course, we're going to be dealing with some rats. But Youngsters are more than just Rattata. Even in Gen 1, they had a pretty decent selection of early game Pokemon. You also have Ekans, Zubat, Spearow, Sandshrew, and Nidoran male, with one Youngster even having a Nidorino on his team. As I was refining the Youngster and the last theme decks, I realized that they make really great mirrors for one another, so look for that last theme deck coming soon. But for now, let's get into this Youngster deck list. As you may have anticipated, we're going to start with Rattata or Rattata, depending on who you ask. It's a pretty weak card with only 30 HP, but it can attack for 20 off of only one colorless energy, and it has free retreat, so you can let it scurry away from danger as quickly as the danger presents itself. But the better option is going to just be evolve into Raticate as quickly as possible. It's not a tank itself with only 60 HP, but for a stage 1, that's kind of alright. It can also attack for 20 off of 1 energy, and can very easily get a Super Fang off on turn 2, which can be really rough for high HP opposing Pokemon. And if they're not a high HP Pokemon, then you're at least putting them in range for a knockout on your next turn with a Bite and maybe a Plus Power. So we are using a 4/4 Raticate line, as Rattata, Raticate are seen as the signature Pokemon of the Youngster, but I'm also going to include a full playset of Nidoran male. And this is another card that can be pretty scary early game for only 1 energy. And like Raticate, Nidorino also has 60 HP, but can deal some decent chunks of damage on turn 2, given that you can get that double colorless energy in hand. 3 copies of that Nidorino, and then to round out the Pokemon in this deck, 2 copies of Ekans. Once again, I get to tease Arbok and then not actually included in the deck. But Ekans does have some decent attacks and can utilize those grass energy that we're already including for Nidorino. There really should have been a Youngster trainer card back then that just let you grab a basic Pokemon with 40 HP or less out of your deck, something like that. But there wasn't, so we're going to be using a playset of Bill instead to help draw all of these cards. That way you can get down some Rattatas and Nidorans on your first turn, and draw into some Raticates and Nidorinos on your second turn. That way you can get those HP boosts, give them a little bit better of a chance of surviving. Oak can do the same, but early game you don't want to be discarding too many cards that you might need later, like your plus powers or your energy removals. Yes, you can go ahead and just play them out of your hand, that way you don't have to discard them, but Oak is more of a last resort if you really need a card, or if you have already played everything from your hand, if it's the last card in your hand, why not go ahead and get a refresher. Couple copies of Trader, just in case you do draw the wrong evolution, you can swap it out with the correct evolution card that you need from your deck with Trader. 4 copies of Potion, another card that I think just fits the Youngster archetype pretty well, especially since having just 20 or 30 damage on one of these Pokemon can be a death sentence for them next turn, so it's better to just go ahead and heal those off as they occur, and then use Defender to also try to reduce that incoming damage. That way you're not going to get O-code every single time. Having a Defender on that Pokemon will reduce that damage, and then you can maybe heal that damage off with a Potion and get just a fresh start with that Pokemon. So full playset of Defender, full playset of Plus Power, which is also going to come in really handy for getting those big KOs, especially after you've already used Super Fang on a Pokemon, or if you just need to add 10 or 20 damage onto a Nidorino's Horn Drill for an OHKO. That's where those Plus Powers really come in handy. You don't want to waste them too much early game. You also don't want to hang on to them and get caught with a Lass, but that's just base Fossil strategy. This deck doesn't use any copies of Lass itself, so yeah, you are going to have to watch out for your double colorless energies getting discarded. And the best way you can combat that with this deck is going to be with your own playset of energy removals. So the trainer base on this deck is pretty straightforward. You're trying to draw those double colorless energies and your evolution cards as quickly as possible. When you take damage, you heal it off with Potion. If you want to prevent damage, you put down a Defender. If you want to deal more damage, you put down a Plus Power. It's Pokemon Battling 101, which seems appropriate for the Youngster. And the deck isn't too energy intensive, as those double colorless are really going to help you get off those bigger attacks. And even if your DCE gets discarded after you attack, Raticate and Nidoran and Ekans all have 1 energy attacks that are pretty decent follow-ups if you can't draw another one of those double colorless quickly enough. So to top this deck off, you got your playset of your DCEs and then 10 grass energy. Even if it is kind of counterintuitive to mix your mouse Pokemon with snake Pokemon, because this Youngster theme deck relies heavily on getting double colorless energy onto your Pokemon and relying on those to get most of these big attacks off, it's a good idea to use Last in this deck to try to prevent those from getting discarded by forcing your opponent to reshuffle any energy removals in their hand into their deck. However, thematically, I wanted the Youngster theme deck to kind of be a mirror to the Last theme deck, and so it didn't make a whole lot of sense to have Last in the Youngster deck. If you don't like Ekans, Zubat is another grass type option that fits with the Youngster's in-game lineup. However, Zubat does require more energy to attack than Ekans, and so it's not as viable as a resource, but it does have free retreat and a fighting resistance, so you could include it to cover the weakness of Raticate. I think that's going to wrap this one up. It's going to be a bit of a shorter video this time, but my channel's not monetized, so it doesn't matter. Bye!